New Year, and welcome to Trauma and True ASMR. We now continue with Chuck Palaniuk's Lullaby, Chapter 14. According to Architectural Digest, big mansions surrounded by vast estate gardens and thoroughbred horse farms are really good places to live. According to Town and Country, strands of fat pearls are lustrous. According to Travel and Leisure, a private yacht anchored in the sunny Mediterranean is relaxing. In the waiting room of the Helen Boyle Real Estate Agency, this is what passes as a big news flash, a real scoop. On the coffee table, there's copies of all these high-end magazines. There's a humpbacked Chesterfield couch upholstered in striped pink silk. The sofa behind it has long lion legs, their claws gripping glass balls. You have to wonder how much of this furniture came here stripped of its hardware, its drawer pulls, and metal details. Solid as junk, it came here and Helen Boyle put it back together. A young woman half my age sits behind a carved Louis XIV desk, staring at a clock radio on the desk. Her desk plate says Mona Sabbat. Next to the clock radio is a police scanner crackling with static. On the clock radio, an older woman is yelling at a younger woman. It seems the younger woman has gotten pregnant out of wedlock, so the older woman is calling her a slut and a whore. A stupid whore. The older woman says, since the slut spread her legs without even getting paid. The woman at the desk, this Mona person, turns off the police scanner and says, I hope you don't mind. I love this show. These mediaholics, these quiet phobics. On the clock radio, the old woman tells the slut to give her baby up for adoption unless she wants to ruin its future. She tells the slut to grow up and finish her degree in microbiology, then get married, but not have any more sex until then. Mona Sabbat takes a brown paper bag from under the desk and takes out something wrapped in foil. She picks the foil open at one end and you can smell garlic and marigolds. On the clock radio, the pregnant slut just cries and cries. Sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can hurt like hell. According to an article in Town and Country, beautifully written and personal correspondence on luxurious stationery is once again very in. In a copy of a state magazine, there's an advertisement that says, attention patrons of the Bridal Mountain Riding and Polo Club. It says, have you contracted a parasitic skin infection from a mount? The phone number is one I haven't seen before. The radio woman tells the slut to stop crying. Here's Big Brother singing and dancing, force-feeding you so your mind never gets hungry enough to think. Mona Sabbat puts both elbows on her desk and cradles her lunch in her hands, leaning close to the radio. The phone rings and she answers it, saying, Helen Boyle Realty. The ride home every time, she says. Sorry, Oyster. Dr. Sarah's on, she says. I'll see you at the ritual. The radio woman calls the crying slut a bitch. The cover of First Class magazine says, Sable, the justifiable homicide. And fast as a hiccup, me only half listening to the radio, me half reading, the calling song goes through my head. From the clock radio, all you can hear is the slut sobbing and sobbing. Instead of the older woman, there's silence. Sweet, golden silence, too perfect to be anyone left alive. The slut draws a long breath and asks Dr. Sarah, she says, Dr. Sarah, are you still there? And a deep voice comes in, saying the Dr. Sarah Lowenstein show is temporarily experiencing some technical difficulties. The deep voice apologizes. A moment later, dance music starts up. The cover of Manor-Born magazine says, Diamonds go casual. I put my face in my hands and groan. The Mona person peels the foil back from her lunch and takes another bite. She turns off the radio and says, bummer. On the backs of her hands, rusty brown henna designs lines trail down her fingers and thumbs lumpy with silver rings. A lot of silver chains loop around her neck and disappear into her orange dress. On her chest, the crinkled orange fabric of her dress is bumpy from all the pendants hanging underneath. Her hair is 1,000 coils and dreadlocks of red and black pinned up over silver filigree earrings. Her eyes look amber, her fingers black. I ask if she's worked here long. You mean, she says, in Earth time. And she takes a paper bag from a drawer in her desk. She uncaps a bright yellow highlighter and opens the book. I ask if Mrs. Boyle ever talks about poetry. And Mona says, you mean Helen? Yes. Does she ever recite poetry in her office? Does she ever call people on the phone and read poems to them? Don't get me wrong, Mona says, but Mrs. Boyle's way too much into the money side of everything, you know. I have to start counting 1, counting 2. It's like this, she says. When traffic's bad, Mrs. Boyle makes me drive home with her, just so she can use the carpool lane. Then I have to take 3 buses to get home myself, you know. I'm counting 4, counting 5. She says, one time we had this great sharing about the power of crystal. It's like we were finally connecting on some level, only it turns out we were talking about 2 totally different realities. Then I'm on my feet, unfolding a sheet of paper from my back pocket. I show her the poem and ask if it looks familiar. Highlighted in the book on her desk, it says, magic is the tuning of needed energy for natural change. Her amber eyes move back and forth in front of the poem, just above the orange neckline of her dress above her right collarbone. She has tattooed 3 tiny black stars. She's sitting cross-legged in her swivel chair. Her feet are bare and dirty, with silver rings around each big toe. I know what this is, she says, and her hand comes up. Before her fingers close around it, I fold the paper and tuck it into my back pocket. Her hand still in the air, she points an index finger at me and says, I've heard of those. It's a culling spell, right? Highlighted in the book on her desk, it says, the ultimate product of death is invoking rebirth. Across the polished cherry top of the desk is a long, deep couch. I ask, what can she tell me about culling spells? All the literature mentions them, she says, and shrugs, but they're supposed to be lost. She says, she holds her hands up, out palm up, and says, let me see again. And I say, how do they work? And she wiggles her fingers. And I shake my head no. I ask, how come it kills other people, but not the person who says it? That was my side note, that was my question after the last chapter. And tilting her head to one side a little, Mona says, why doesn't a gun kill the person who pulls the trigger? It's the same principle. She lifts both arms above her head and stretches, twisting her hands toward the ceiling. She says, this doesn't work like a recipe in a cookbook. You can't dissect this with some electron microscope. Her dress is sleeveless, and the hair under her arms is just regular mousy brown. So I say, how can it work on somebody who doesn't even hear the spell? I look at the radio. How can a spell work if you don't say it out loud? Mona Sabbath sighs. She turns her open book face down on the desk and sticks the yellow highlighter behind one ear. She pulls open a desk drawer and takes out a pad and pencil, saying, you don't have a clue, do you? Writing on the pad, she says, when I was Catholic, this is years ago, I could say a 7-second Hail Mary. I could say a 9-second Our Father. When you get as much penance as I did, you get fast, she says. When you get that fast, it's not even words anymore, but it's still a prayer. She says, all a spell does is focus and intention. She says this slow, word by word, and waits a beat. Her eyes on mine, she says, if the practitioner's intention is strong enough, the object of the spell will fall asleep, no matter where. The more emotion a person has bottled up, she says, the more powerful spell. Mona Sabbath squints at me and says, "When was the last time you got laid?" "Almost 2 decades ago, but I do not tell her that." "My guess," she says, "is you're a powder keg of something. Rage, sorrow, something." She stops writing and flips through her highlighted book, stopping at a page. She reads for a moment, then she flips on to another page. "A well-balanced person," she says. "A functioning person would have to read the song out loud to make someone fall asleep." Still reading, she frowns and says, "Until you deal with your real personal issues, you'll never be able to control yourself." I ask if her book says all that. "Most of it's from Dr. Sarah," she says. And I say how the calling song does more than put people to sleep. "How do you mean?" she says. "I mean they die." I say, "You sure you've never seen Ellen Boyle with a book called Poems and Rhymes from Around the World?" Mona Sabbath's open hands drop to the desk and picks up her lunch, wrapped in foil. She takes a bite, staring at the clock radio. She says, "Just now, on the radio," Mona says. "Did you just do that?" I nod. "You just forced Dr. Sarah to reincarnate," she says. I ask if she can just call Ellen Hoover Boyle on her cell phone, and maybe I could talk to her. My pager starts beeping, and this Mona person says, "So you're saying Ellen uses the same calling song?" The message on my pager says to call Nash. The pager says it's important, and I say it's nothing I can prove, but Mrs. Boyle knows how. I say I need her for help so I can control it, so I can control myself. And Mona Sabbath stops writing on the pad and tears off the page. She holds it halfway between us and says, "If you're serious about learning how to control this power, you need to come to a Wiccan practitioner's ritual." She shakes the paper at me and says, "We have over 1,000 years of experience in one room," and she turns on the police scanner. I take the paper. It's an address, date, and time. The police scanner says, "Unit Bravo 9, please respond to a code 914 at the Loomis Police Apartments 5D. The mystical depth of this knowledge takes a lifetime to learn," she says. She picks up her lunch and peels back the foil. "Oh," she says, "and bring your favorite meat-free hot dish." And the police scanner says, "Copy." Chapter 15. Helen Hoover Boyle takes her cell phone out of the green and white purse hanging from the crook of her elbow. She takes out a business card and looks from the card to the phone as she punches in a number. The little green button's bright in the dim light, bright green against the pink of her fingernail. The business card has a gold edge. She presses the phone deep into the side of her pink hair. Into the phone, she says, "Yes, I'm somewhere in your lovely store, and I'm afraid I'll need some help finding my way out." She leans into the note and card taped to an armoire twice her height. Into the phone, she says, "I'm facing," and she reads, "an Adam-style neoclassical armoire with fire-gilded bronze arabesque cartouches." She looks at me and rolls her eyes. Into the phone, she says, "It's marked $17,000. Her feet step out of green high heels, and she stands flat-footed on the concrete floor in sheer white stockings. It's not the white that makes you think of underwear. It's more the white of the skin underneath. The stockings make her toes look webbed. The suit she's wearing, the skirt is fitted to her hips. It's green, but not the green of lime, more the green of a key lime pie. It's not the green of an avocado, but more the green of an avocado bisque, topped with a paper-thin sliver of lemon, served ice-cold in a yellow Cervé soup plate. It's green the way a pool table with green felt looks under the yellow ball, not the way it looks under the red 3. I ask Helen Hoover Boyle what a code 914 is, and she says, "A dead body." And I say, "I thought so." Into the phone, she says, "Now, was that a left or a right turn at the rosewood Hebblewhite dresser carved with the anthemion details and flocked with powdered silk. She puts her hand over the phone and leans closer to me, saying, "You don't know Mona," she says. "I doubt if her little witch party means anything more than a mob of hippies dancing naked around a flat rock." This close, her hair isn't a solid color of pink. Each curl is lighter pink along the outer edge, with blush, peach, rose, almost red as you look deeper inside. "Into the phone," she says, "and if I pass the Cromwellian satin lolling chair with ivory escutcheons, then I've gone too far. Got it?" "To me," she says. "Lord, I wish you'd never told Mona. Mona will tell her boyfriend, and now I'll never hear the end of it." The labyrinth of furniture crowds around us, all browns, reds, and black, gilt and mirrors here and there. With one hand, she fingers the diamond solitaire on her other hand, the diamond chunky and sharp. She twists it around so the diamond rises over her palm, and she presses her open palm on the face of the armoire and gouges an arrow pointing left, blazing a trail through history. "Into the phone," she says. "Thank you so much." She flips it shut and snaps it inside her purse. The beads around her neck are some green stone altering with beads made of gold. Under these are strands of pearls. None of this jewelry I've ever seen before. She steps back into her shoes and says, "From now on, I can see my job is going to be keeping you and Mona apart." She flaps the pink hair over her ear and says, "Follow me." With her flat, open hand, she gouges an arrow across the top of a table, a limed oak Sheraton gate-laid card table with brass filigree railing. It says on the note card, "A cripple now." Leading the way, Helen Hoover Boyle says, "I wish you'd let this whole issue drop," she says. "It really is no concern of yours." Because I'm just a reporter is what she means. Because I'm a reporter tracking down a story he can't ever risk telling the world. Because at best, this makes me a voyeur, at worst, a vulture. She stops in front of a huge wardrobe with mirrored doors, and from behind her I can see myself reflected just over her shoulder. She snaps open her purse and takes out a small gold tube. "That's exactly what I mean," she says. The note card says it is French-Egyptian revival, with panels of papier-mâché, palmette, detailing, and festooned with polychromed strap work. In the mirror, she twists the gold tube until a pink lipstick grows out, and behind her I say, "What if I'm not just my job? Maybe I'm not just some two-dimensional predator taking advantage of an interesting situation." For whatever reason, Nash comes to mind. I say, maybe I noticed the book in the first place because I used to have a copy. Maybe I used to have a wife and a daughter. What if I read the damn poem to my family one night with the intention of putting them to sleep? Hypothetically speaking, of course, what if I killed them? I say, is that the kind of credentials she's looking for? She stretches her lips up and down and touches the lipstick to the pink lipstick already there. I limp a step closer, asking, "Does that make me wounded enough in her book?" Her shoulders squared straight across. She rolls her lips together. They come apart slow, stuck together for the last moment. God forbid anybody should ever suffer more than Helen Hoover Boyle. And I say, maybe I've lost every bit as much as her. And she twists her lipstick down. She snaps her lipstick in her purse and turns to face me. Standing there, glittering and still, she says, "Hypothetically speaking." And I pull my face into a smile and say, "Of course." With her open hand against the armoire, she gouges an arrow pointing right, and she starts walking but slow, dragging her hand along the wall of cupboards and dressers, everything waxed and polished, ruining everything she touches. Leading me on, she says, "Do you ever wonder where that poem originated?" "Africa," I say, staying right behind her. But the book it came from," she says, walking past gun cabinets and press cupboards and farthingale chairs. She says, "Witches call their collection of spells their book of shadows." Poems and Rhymes from Around the World was published 20 years ago, I tell her. I did some calling around. The book had a press run of 500 copies. The publisher, Kinderhouse Press, has since gone bankrupt, and the press plates and reprint rights belong to someone who bought them from the original author's estate. The author died of no apparent cause but 3 years ago. If that makes the book public domain, I don't know. I couldn't find out who now owns the rights. And Helen Hoover Boyle stops dragging her diamond midway across the face of a wide beveled mirror and says, I own the rights. And I know where you're going with this. I bought the rights 3 years ago. Book dealers have managed to find 300 of those original 500 books, and I've burned every one. She says, but that's not what's important. I agree. What's important is finding the last few books and containing this disaster. Doing damage control. What's important is learning a way to forget it ourselves. Maybe that's why Mona Sabat and her group can teach us. Please, Helen says. You're not still planning to go to her witch party, she says. What did you find out about the original author of the book? His name was Basil Frankie, and there was nothing original about him. He found out-of-print public domain stories and combined them to create anthologies, old medieval sonnets, bawdy limericks, nursery rhymes. Some of it he ripped out of old books he found. Some of it he lifted off the internet. He wasn't very choosy. Anything he could get for free he'd lump into a book. But the source of this particular poem, she says, I don't know. It's probably some old book still packed in a box in the basement of a house somewhere. Not Frankie's house, says Helen Hoover Boyle. I bought the whole estate. The kitchen trash was still under his sink, his underwear still folded in his dresser drawers. Everything, it wasn't there. And I have to ask, did she also kill him? Hypothetically speaking, she says, if I had just killed my husband after killing my son, wouldn't I be a little angry that some plagiarizing, lazy, irresponsible, greedy fool had planted the bomb that would destroy everyone I loved? Just like she hypothetically killed the Stewarts. She says, my point is that original Book of Shadows is still out there somewhere. I agree, and we need to find it and destroy it. And Helen Hoover Boyle smiles, her pink smile. She says, you must be kidding, she says. Having the power of life and death isn't enough. You must wonder what other poems are in that book. Hitting me as fast as a hiccup, me resting my weight on my good foot, just staring at her, I say no. She says, maybe you can live forever, and I say no. And she says, maybe you can make anyone love you, and I say no. And she says, maybe you can turn straw into gold, and I say no and turn on my heel. Maybe you could bring out world peace, she says. And I say no and start off between the walls of armoires and bookcases, between the barricades of curio cabinets and headboards. I head down another canyon of furniture. Behind me, she calls, maybe you could turn sand into bread. And I keep limping along, and she calls, where are you going? This is the way out. At an Irish pine vitrine with broken pediment titanium, I turn right. At a Chippendale bureau cabinet, japanned in black lacquer, I turn left. Her voice behind everything says, maybe you could cure the sick. Maybe you could cure the crippled. At a Belgian sideboard with a cornice of egg and dart molding, I turn right, then left at the Edwardian standing specimen case with a Bohemian art glass mural. And the voice coming after me says, maybe you can clean the environment and turn the world into a paradise. An arrow gouged in a pie-crust occasional table points one way, so I go the other. And the voice says, maybe you could generate unlimited clean energy. Maybe you could travel through time to prevent tragedy, to learn to meet people. Maybe you could give people rich, full, happy lives. Maybe limping around a noisy apartment for the rest of your life isn't enough. On a folding screen of blackwork embroidery, an arrow points one way and I turn the other. My pager goes off again, and it's Nash, and the voice says, if you can kill someone. Maybe you can bring them back. Maybe this is my second chance. The voice says, maybe you don't go to hell for the things you do. Maybe you go to hell for the things you don't do. The things you don't finish. My pager goes off again, and it says the message is important, and I keep limping along. Chapter 16. Nash isn't standing at the bar. He's sitting alone at a little table in the back, in the dark, except for a little candle on the table, and I tell him, hey. I got his 10,000 calls on my pager. I ask, what's so important? On the table is a newspaper folded with the headline saying, 7 dead in mystery plague. The subhead says, esteemed local editor and public leader believed to be the first victim. Whom they mean, I have to read. It's Duncan, and it turns out his first name was Leslie. It's anybody's guess where they got the esteemed part and the leader part. So much for the journalist and the news being mutually exclusive. Nash turns the newspaper with his finger and says, you see this? And I tell him I've been out of the office all afternoon. And damn it, I forgot to file my next installment on Crib Death. Reading the first page, I see myself quoted. Duncan was more than just my editor. I'm saying more than just my mentor. Leslie Duncan was like a father to me. Damn Oliphant in his sweaty hands. Hitting me as fast as a chill, chilling me all down my back, the calling song spins through my head. And the body count grows. Somewhere, Oliphant must be sliding to the floor or toppling out of his chair. All my powder keg rage issues, they strike again. The more people die, the more things stay the same. An empty paper plate sits in front of Nash with just some wax paper and a yellow smears of potato salad on it. And Nash is twisting a paper napkin between his hands, twisting it into a long, thick cord, and says, and, looking at me across the table from him, says, we picked up the guy in your apartment building this afternoon. He says, between the guy's cats and the cockroaches, there's not much to autopsy. The guy we saw filed down in here this morning, the sideburns guy with the cell phone, Nash says the medical examiner's stumped. Plus, after that, 3 people dropped dead between here and the newspaper building. Then they found another one in the newspaper building, he says, died waiting for an elevator. He says the medical examiner thinks these folks could all be dead of the same cause. They're saying plague, Nash says. But the police are really thinking drugs, he says. Probably succinylcholine. Not sure if I pronounced that right. Either self-administered or somebody gave them an injection. It's a neuromuscular blocking agent. It relaxes you so much you quit breathing and die of anoxia. The woman, the one behind the barricade at the movie shoot who came running with her arm out to stop me, the one with the walkie-talkie, the details of her were long black hair, a tight t-shirt over right up tits. She had a decent little pooper and tight jeans. It could be she and Nash took the scenic route back to the hospital, another conquest. Whatever Nash is so odd to tell me, I don't want to know. He says, but I think the police are wrong. Nash whips the rolled paper napkin through the candle flame, and the flame jumps stuttering up a curl of black smoke. The flame goes back to normal, and Nash says, in case you want to take care of me in the same you took care of those other people, he says, you have to know I wrote a letter explaining all this, and I left it with a friend saying what I know at this point, and I smile and ask what he means. What does he know? And Nash holds the tip of his twisted paper a little over the candle flame and says, I know you thought your neighbor was dead. I know I saw a guy drop dead in this bar with you looking at him, and 4 more died when you walked past them on your way back to work. The tip of the paper is getting brown, and Nash says, granted, it's not much, but it's more than the police have right now. The tip puffs into flame, just a tiny flame, and Nash says, maybe you can fill the police in on the rest of it. The flame's getting bigger. There's people enough here that somebody's going to notice. Nash sitting here, setting fires in a bar. People are going to call the police. And I say he's deluded. The little torch is getting bigger. The bartender looks over at us at Nash's little fuse burning shorter and shorter. Nash just watches the fire in his hand growing out of control. The heat of it on my lips, the smoke in my eyes. The bartender yells, "Hey, quit squatting around." And Nash moves the burning napkin toward the wax paper and paper plate on the table, and I grab his wrist, his uniform cuffs smeared yellow with mustard and his skin underneath loose and soft, and I tell him, "Okay," I say, "just stop, okay?" I say he has to promise never to tell. And with the fuse still burning between us, Nash says, "Sure," he says, "I promise." Chapter 17. Helen walks up with a wine glass in her, just a glimpse of red in the bottom, the glass almost empty. And Mona says, "Where'd you get that?" "My drink," Helen says. She's wearing a thick coat made of some fur in different shades of brown, with white on each tip. It's open in the front, with a powder blue suit underneath. She sips the last of the wine and says, "I got it off the bar over there, next to the bowl of oranges and that little brass statue." And Mona digs both hands into her own red and black dreadlocks and squeezes the top of her head. She says, "That's the altar." She points to the empty glass and says, "You just drank my sacrifice to the goddess." Helen presses the empty glass into Mona's hand and says, "Well, how about you get the goddess another sacrifice, but make it a double this time?" We're in Mona's apartment, where all the furniture is pushed out into a little patio behind sliding glass doors and covered with a blue plastic tarp, and that all that's left is the empty living room with a little broom branching off one side where the dinette should be. The walls and shag carpet are beige. The bowl of oranges and the brass statue of somebody Hindu dancing. They're on the fireplace mantel with yellow daisies and pink carnations scattered around them. The light switches are taped over with masking tape so you can't use them. Instead, Mona's got some flat rocks on the floor with candles set on them, purple and white candles, some lit, some not. In the fireplace, instead of a fire, more candles are burning. Strands of white smoke drift up from the little cones of brown incense on the flat rocks with the candles. The only real light is when Mona opens the refrigerator or the microwave oven. Through the walls come horses screaming and cannon fire. Either a brave, stubborn Southern belle is trying to keep the Union Army from burning the apartment next door, or somebody's television is too loud. Down through the ceiling comes a fire siren and people screaming that we're supposed to ignore. Then gunshots and tires squealing, sounds we have to pretend are okay. They don't mean anything, it's just television. An explosion vibrates down from the upstairs. A woman begs someone not to rape her. It's not real, it's just a movie. We're the culture that cried wolf. These dramaholics, these pisophobics. With her black fingernails, Mona takes the empty wine glass, the lips smeared with Helen's pink lipstick, and she walks away barefoot, wearing a white terry cloth bathrobe, into the kitchen. The doorbell rings. Mona crosses back through the living room, putting another glass of red wine on the mantel. She says, "Do not embarrass me in front of my coven," and she opens the door. On the doorstep is a short woman wearing glasses with thick frames of plastic. The woman's wearing oven mitts and holding covered casserole dish in front of her. I brought a deli takeout box of 3-bean salad. Helen brought pasta from Chez Chef. The glasses woman scrapes her clogs on the doormat. She looks at Helen and me and says, "Mulberry, you have guests." And Mona conks herself in the temple with the heel of her hands and says, "That's me," she means. "That's my Wiccan name, I mean Mulberry." She says, "Sparrow, this is Mr. Streeter." And Sparrow nods. And Mona says, "And this is my boss, Chinchilla," Helen says. The microwave oven starts beeping, and Mona leads Sparrow into the kitchen. Helen goes to the mantel and takes a drink from the glass of wine. The doorbell rings, and Mona calls from the kitchen for us to answer it. This time, He's a kid with long blonde hair and a red goatee, wearing gray sweatpants and a sweatshirt. He's carrying a crock pot with brown glass lid. Something sticky and brown has boiled up around the lip, and the underside of the glass lid is fogged with condensation. He steps inside the door and hands the crock pot to me. He kicks off tennis shoes and pulls the sweatshirt off over his head, his hair flying everywhere. He lays the shirt on top of the crock pot in my hands and lifts his leg to pull first one leg, then the other leg out of his sweatpants. He puts the pants in my arms, and he's standing there, hands on hips, dick and balls naked. Helen pulls the front of her coat shut and throws back the last of the wine. The crock pot is heavy and hot, with the smell of brown sugar and either tofu or the dirty gray sweatpants. And Mona says, "Oyster," and she's standing beside us. She takes the clothes and crock pot from me, saying, "Oyster, this is Mr. Streeter." She says, "Everybody, this is my boyfriend, Oyster." And the kid shakes the hair off his eyes and looks at me. He says, "Mulberry thinks you have a culling poem." His dick tapers to a dribbling pink stalactite of wrinkled foreskin. A silver ring pierces the tip. And Helen gives me a look, smiling, but with her teeth clenched. This kid, Oyster, grabs the terry cloth lapels of Mona's bathroom and says, "Geez, you have a lot of clothes on." He leans into her and kisses her over the crock pot. "We do ritual nudity," Mona says, looking at the floor. She blushes and motions with the crock pot, saying, "Oyster, this is Mrs. Boyle, who I work for." The details about Oyster are his hair. It looks shattered, the way a pine tree looks struck by lightning, splintered blonde and standing up in every direction. He's got one of those young bodies. The arms and legs look segmented, big with muscles, then narrow at the joints, the knees and elbows and waist. Helen holds out her hand and Oyster takes it, saying, "A peridot ring." Standing there naked and young, he lifts Helen's hand all the way to his face. Standing there all tan and muscled, he looks from her ring down the length of her arm and to her eyes and says, a tone this passionate would overpower most people, and he kisses it. "We do ritual nudity," Mona says, "but you don't have to. I mean, you really don't have to." She nods toward the kitchen and says, "Oyster, come help me for a little." And going, Oyster looks at me and says, "Clothing is dishonesty in its purest form." He smiles with just half a mouth and winks and says, "Nice tie, Dad." And I'm counting. 1, counting 2, counting 3. After Mona's gone into the kitchen, Helen turns to me and says, "I can't believe you told another person." She means Nash. It wasn't as if I had a choice. Besides, no copies of the poem are available. I told him I burned mine, and I've burned every copy I found in print. He doesn't know about Helen Hoover Boyle or Mona Sabat. There's no way he can use the information. Okay, so there are still a few dozen copies in public libraries. Maybe we can track them down and eliminate while we hunt for the original source material. The Book of Shadows, Helen says. The grimoire, as witches call it. The Book of Spells, and the power, all the power in the world. The doorbell rings, and the next man drops his baggy shorts and peels off his t-shirt and tells us his name is Hedgehog. The details about Hedgehog include the empty skin shaking in his arms and chest and ass. His curly, black pubic hair matches the couple of hairs stuck to my palm after we shake hands. Helen's hands draw up inside the cuffs of her coat sleeves, and she goes to the mantel, takes an orange from the altar, and starts to peel it. A man named Badger, with a real parrot on his shoulder, arrives. A woman named Clematis arrives. A lobelia arrives. A bluebird rings the doorbell, then a possum. Then someone named Lentils arrives, or someone brings lentils. It's not clear which. Helen drinks another sacrifice. Mona comes out of the kitchen with Oyster, but without her bathrobe. What's left is a pile of dirty clothes inside the front door, and Helen and I are the only ones still dressed. Deep in the pile, a phone rings, and Sparrow digs it out. Wearing just her glasses, her breast hanging as she leans over the pile. Sparrow answers the phone. Dormer Dingus and Diggs, attorneys at law, she says. Describe the rash, please. It takes a minute to recognize Mona from just her head and the pile of chains around her neck. You don't want to get caught looking anywhere else, but her pubic hair is shaved. From straight on, her thighs are two perfect parentheses, with her shaved V between them. From the side, her breasts seem to reach out, trying to touch people with her pink nipples. From behind, the small of her back splits into her two solid buttocks, and I'm counting 4, counting 5, counting 6. Oysters carrying a white deli takeout carton. A woman named Honeysuckle in just a calico head wrap talks about her past lives. And Ellen says, doesn't reincarnation strike you as just another form of procrastination? I ask, when do we eat? And Mona says, geez, you sound just like my father. I ask Ellen how she keeps from killing everybody here. And she takes another glass of wine off the mantel, saying anybody in this room, and it would be a mercy killing. She drinks half and gives the rest to me. The incense smells like jasmine, and everything in the room smells like the incense. Oyster steps into the center of the room and holds the deli carton over his head and says, okay, who brought this portion? It's my 3-bean salad. And Mona says, please, Oyster, don't. And holding the deli carton by its little wire handle, the handle pinched between 2 fingers, Oyster says, meat-free means no meat. Now fess up, who brought this? The hair under his raised arm is bright orange, so is his other body hair. Down below, I say, it's just a bean salad with, Oyster says, and jiggles the carton with nothing. The room's so quiet, you can hear the Battle of Gettysburg next door. You can hear the folk song guitar of somebody depressed in the apartment upstairs. An actor screams and a lion roars, and bombs whistle down from the sky. With Worcester sauce in the dressing, Oyster says, that means anchovies. That means meat. That means cruelty and death. He holds the carton in one hand and points at it with his other, saying, this is going down the toilet where it belongs. And I'm counting 7, counting 8. Sparrow is giving everyone small round stones out of a basket she carries in one hand. She gives one to me. It's gray and cold, and she says, hold on to this and tune into the vibration of its energy. This will put us all on the same vibration for the ritual. You hear the toilet flush. The parrot on Badger's shoulder keeps twisting its head around and yanking out green feathers with its beak. Then the bird tilts its head back and gulps each feather in, jerking whiplash bites. Where the feathers are gone, plucked, the skin looks dimpled and raw. The man, Badger, has a folded towel thrown over his shoulder for the parrot to grip, and the towel is spotted down the back with yellowy bird shit. The bird yanks another feather and eats it. Sparrow gives a stone to Helen, and she snaps it into her powder blue handbag. I take the wine glass from her and sip it. In the newspaper today, it says how the man at the elevator, the man I wished to death, he had 3 children, all under 6 years old. The cop I killed was supporting his elderly parents so they wouldn't be placed in a nursing home. He and his wife were foster parents. He coached Little League and soccer. The woman with the walkie-talkie, she was 2 weeks pregnant. I drink more of the wine. It tastes like pink lipstick. In the newspaper today is an ad that says, attention, owners of Dorset Fine China. The ad copy says, if you feel nauseated or lose bowel control after eating, please call the following number. To me, Oyster says, Mulberry thinks you killed Dr. Sarah, but I don't think you know jack shit. Mona reaches up to put another sacrifice on the mantel, and Ellen lifts the glass out of her fingers. To me, Oyster says, the only power of life and death you have is every time you order a hamburger at McDonald's. His face stuck in my face. He says, you just pay your filthy money, and somewhere else the axe falls. And I'm counting 9, counting 10. Sparrow shows me a thick manual open in her hands. Inside are pictures of wands and iron pots. There are pictures of bells and quartz quartz crystals, different colors and sizes of everything. There are black-handled knives called a thame. Sparrow says this, so it rhymes with whammy. She shows me photos of herbs bundled so you can use them to sprinkle purification water. She shows me amulets polished to deflect negative energy. A white-handled ritual knife is called a baleen. Her breast rests on the open catalog, covering half of each page. Standing next to me, the muscles jumping on his neck, making fists with both hands, Oyster says, "Do you know why most survivors of the Holocaust are vegan? It's because they know what it's like to be treated like an animal." The body heat coming off him, he says. In egg production, did you know that all male chicks are ground up alive and spread as fertilizer? Sparrow flips through her catalog and points at something and says, "If you check around, we offer the best deals for ritual tools in the medium price range." The next sacrifice to the goddess, I drink. The one after that, Helen downs. Oyster circles the room. He comes back to stay. Did you know that most pigs don't bleed to death in the few seconds before they're drowned in scalding 140-degree water? The sacrifice after that I get. The wine tastes like jasmine incense. The wine tastes like animal blood. Helen takes the empty wine glass into the kitchen, and there's a flash of real light as she opens the refrigerator and takes out a jug of red wine. And Oyster sticks his chin over my shoulder from behind and says, "Most cows don't die right away." He says they put a snare around the cow's neck and drag it screaming through the slaughterhouse, cutting off the front and back legs while he's still alive. Behind him is a naked girl named Starfish, who flips open his cell phone and says, "Duly Donner and Dunn, attorneys at law," she says. "Tell me, what color is your fungus?" Badger comes out of the bathroom, ducking to get his parrot through the doorway. A shred of paper struck in his butt crack. Naked, his skin looks dimpled and raw, plucked. If the bird sits on his shoulder while he sits on the toilet, I don't want to know. And across the room is Mona Mulberry. She's laughing with Honeysuckle. She's pinned her red and black dreadlocks up into a pile with just her face sticking out of the bottom. On her fingers are rings with heavy red glass jewels. Around her neck, the carpet of silver chains comes down to a pile of amulets and pendants and charms on her breasts. Costume jewelry. A little girl playing dress up, barefoot. She's the age my daughter would be if I still had a daughter. Helen stumbles back into the room. She pinches her tongue between two fingers and then goes around the room, using two wet fingers to pinch out the cones of incense. She leans back against the fireplace mantel and lifts the glass of wine to her pink mouth. Over the glass, she watches the room. She watches Oyster circling me. He's the age her son, Patrick, would be. Helen's the age my wife would be if I had a wife. Oyster's the son she would have if she had a son, hypothetically speaking, of course. This might be the life I had if I had a life. My wife, distant and drunk. My daughter, exploring some crackpot cult, embarrassed by us. Her parents, her boyfriend, would be this hippie asshole trying to pick a fight with me, her dad. And maybe you can go back in time. Maybe you can raise the dead, all the dead, past and present. Maybe this is my second chance. This is exactly the way my life might have turned out. Helen, in her chinchilla coat, is watching the parrot eat itself. She's watching Oyster. And Mona's shouting, "Everybody, everybody," she's saying. "It's time to start the invocation. So if we could just create the sacred space, we can get started." Next door, the Civil War veterans are limping home to sad music and reconstruction. With Oyster circling me, the rock in my fist is warm by now, and I'm counting 11, counting 12. Mona Savitt has got to come with us. Someone without blood on her hands. Mona and Helen and me and Oyster, the four of us, will hit the road together. Just another dysfunctional family. A family vacation. The quest for an unholy grail. With 100 paper tigers to slay along the way, 100 libraries to plunder, Meniere's disease, but it looks like black magic, if you ask me. And with her arms spread, the plain brown hair under her arms showing, Mona is herding people into the center of the room. Sparrow points at something in her catalog and says, "This is the minimum you'll need to get started." Oyster shakes the hair off his eyes and sticks his chin at me. He comes around to poke his index finger into my chest, poking it there hard, pinned in the middle of my blue tie, and he says, "Listen, Dad." Poking me, he says, "The only culling song you know is Make Mine Medium Well Done." And I stop counting. Fast as a muscle twitch, muzzling Oyster back, I shove him hard and slap the kid away, my hands loud against the kid's bare skin, everybody quiet and watching, and the culling song echoes through my head. And I've killed again. Mona's boyfriend, Helen's son, Oyster stands there another moment looking at me, the hair hanging over his eyes. And the parent falls off Badger's shoulder. Oyster puts his hands up, fingers spread, and says, "Chill out, Dad," and goes with Sparrow and everybody to look at the parrot dead at Badger's feet. Dead and plucked, half naked, and Badger prods the bird with his sandal and says, "Plucky." I look at Helen, my wife, in this new creepy way, till death do us part. And maybe if you can kill someone, maybe you can bring them back. And Helen's already looking at me, the smeared pink glass in her hand. She shakes her face at me and says, "I didn't do it." She holds up 3 fingers, her thumb and pinky touching in front, and says, "Which is honor, I swear." Alright, we're going to stop it there for tonight. Some of those things I read were very difficult for me to read. Apologies if you felt the same in hearing it.